What could the Powerpuff Girls have possibly done better than Superman, you ask? Well, because this isn't clickbait, I actually have an answer for you.
You girls protect your city just as well as Batman and Superman.
In the realm of superheroes, Powerpuff Girls can probably stand shoulder to shoulder with Spider-Man and Batman on this one thing. No other superhero property that comes to mind has a villain roster as deep as the Powerpuff Girls. I think it's well established that outside of Brainiac and Lex Luthor and maybe Darkseid when you want to go very big, Superman's rogues are not the most interesting. When you think back to The Dark Knight, which was several people's favorite superhero movie, the reason it was so popular was maybe 30% because of Batman, and I'm probably being generous. Whenever people want to revisit moments from that film, they all search for the Joker's scenes, and the Powerpuff Girls are much the same. I'll be honest, of all the cartoons of Cartoon Network's golden years, the Powerpuff Girls are probably the only one I never go back to. But when I think of it, it's always the villains who come to mind. And Miss Bellum. Everyone remembers Miss Bellum.
Much better, don't you think?
Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup were a great balance of personalities, but they were all such basic personality tropes of the leader, the badass, and the sweetheart. While they did some interesting things with their personalities, like the one where Buttercup became so dirty and nasty because she loved fighting but she hated taking baths, or where she fell in love with the leader of the Gangrene Gang, or when Bubbles got tired of being teased for being soft so she went full-on Dark Knight, or the one where Blossom... I actually can't think of a memorable Blossom-centric episode. Anyway, you get the point. There was only so much you could do with the girls to make them compelling for as many episodes as the show has. And that's where the villains come in. Like Batman and Spider-Man's rogues, the Powerpuff Girls show was mostly carried by a roster of really charismatic villains. I'm not going to go through all of them, I'll just mention the most interesting ones, but they all worked together because of great world building. You always bought that they all lived in that city, and whenever the girls were dealing with any of them, it was easy to picture that the rest of them were going about their lives and their daily routines. Kinda like the MCU when it was good. The advantage of a show like this is that there was always time to explore what Mojo Jojo did in his free time when he wasn't out there perpetrating evil. I keep talking about the most basic aspects of world building in my videos, and as basic as they sound, they create a huge psychological attachment to anything that you watch. They pull you into that virtual ecosystem and make you feel like you're a part of it. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself with this, but the episode where the villains were in prison watching a televised Powerpuff Girls birthday was a great example. It was kind of like watching a live sporting event, but in this case, the winner was supposed to be whoever sent a gift that actually managed to destroy the girls. It was really nice watching the villains as they bonded over a mutual but evil shared goal. Kinda like cheering for the team that you hate. But back to the character breakdowns. Mojo Jojo seemed to be the main arch nemesis, a monkey with an exposed brain. I think beyond the great voice acting and the charismatic nature of the character in general, you just can't go wrong with a classic old-fashioned take-over-the-world villain. The episode that explored his origins and how he contributed to the creation of the girls was a really interesting concept to me. It was kind of like the Spider-Man approach to villains with all the melodrama of having personal connections to them. The stories were never complex, but they always had an interesting approach which made this monkey very culturally relevant. I think everyone knows Mojo Jojo. Damn it, I was planning a much shorter video, but I'm just starting to realize how big this topic is. Some of the best episodes did not even have the main recurring villains.
Men can't do anything right. Who is this? It's Ben Franklin, you idiot! A man! I want Susan B. Anthony coins. Now!
Okay, let's speed run through a couple and then I'll dwell a bit on the good ones. There were the rowdy rough boys who I didn't care for that much. I think they were more so for younger audiences who are more into the girls versus boys narratives, which when I think about it is the entirety of social media right now. But this is a very common trope in superhero comics, not the girl versus boy thing. There's always an evil, cracked mirror version of the hero who they can fight on equal ground because they all have the same powers. You can't argue the classics, but personality-wise, they were just mean boys. The way the girls defeated them was really interesting though. In the time before girl boss drama online, the writers did something you would never see today. The girls realized that the rowdy rough boys were stronger, so they used the powers of the streets to win.
She belongs to the streets.
No, I'm kidding, relax. There were also the Amoeba Boys, who are not very good at crime, except the one episode where they spread a plague across the whole city and got everyone really sick. The worst kind of evil, which they caused by accident, to be fair. But they were never taken seriously by anyone because they were just fake gangsters, and that was the recurring joke every time they were featured in an episode. Then there was Princess Morbucks, who was just a scorned Powerpuff Girls fan. She was a spoiled rich girl who wanted to be part of the crew, but she was rejected because she had no powers. So she used her father's money to buy powers like Iron Man. She actually reminds me of that song.
I don't see how you can hate from outside of the club. You can't even get in.
There were some really cool looking battles between her and the girls, but the episodes were never a huge highlight. But she was a necessary villain like Lex Luthor or Obadiah Stane or the Kingpin. Who all happen to be bald men. Okay, I'll throw in Norman Osborn or Syndrome as well. Actually, Syndrome is the perfect comparison because there is always a wealthy and jealous villain in these things.
How do you think I got rich?
The princess was not a fan favorite though.
Because you're just a spoiled brat.
So let's get to the good stuff now. Fuzzy Lumpkins. This is one of my favorite villains on the show. He was a simple country creature with an explosive temper who just wanted to be left alone. Whenever I leave the house and I get into traffic with people who cannot drive to save their lives, I identify with Fuzzy even more. He was just misunderstood. I think he's the embodiment of all our urban frustrations when we have to deal with other people. People like to meme that Thanos was right, but in my opinion, Fuzzy was right. He is not complex at all, but for some reason I really clicked with that simple motivation. He just wanted to play his banjo, chill in a hot tub, and just be left alone. Townsville just needed to stop poking the bear. The Gangrene Gang was another cool crew of mutant-looking green villains who were just your garden variety thugs. Their sins ranged from swatting other villains like your favorite YouTubers to opportunistic crime and just straight up bullying. The crew was very diverse, from Italian to British to Irish and Hispanic hoodlum stereotypes, but their appearances were always memorable. The most notable, which I mentioned earlier, was when Buttercup fell in love with their leader called Ace. I won't get into it, but I know so many girls who have gotten into secret situationships with people who they have no business getting with. Very relatable episode. Then there was also him. He was supposed to be the scariest and most powerful recurring villain on the show. He was a cross-dressing demon or a mutant? Whatever he was, the closest comparison I would give would be the Joker. He didn't really do things for material gain, but he always had a more chaotic motivation for the things he did. But him and the other characters really seemed to have a cordial relationship with the girls until it was time to do some big crime. Huge fan of the character. And now we get to my favorite, Sedusa. Her name was a play on Medusa with the hair and seducing with the seduction. She would usually impersonate other women and use seduction as a tool to get what she wanted, which was usually wealth. She was kind of like the Slay Queen villain on the show. I've actually seen comments online from men saying that she's horrible, but they can change her. So I'd say her persona was successful. Everything from her design to her name to the voice acting and overall concept was just great. When she tried to get with the professor so that she could control the girls from the inside, she had an alter ego called I'm a Good Lady. That was her name. First name Ima, second name Good Lady, which was just hilarious to me. I wish they had done more with her character, but I do appreciate what we got. Her episodes always felt slightly more mature than the rest of the show, especially when she decided to impersonate Townsville's favorite redhead.
Female superheroes aren't nearly as revered as male superheroes.
Supergirl? Batgirl?
They're so lame. Merely extensions of their male counterparts.
For the one-off characters, there was this Star Wars parody episode with the Boogeyman. He was a smooth disco-era stereotype who decided to eclipse the sun with a disco ball so that he could plunge Townsville into perpetual night. The joy they took in freaking kids out around the city was kinda hilarious, and he was just a smooth villain overall. I remember watching this episode before I ever watched the original Star Wars trilogy, so when I eventually watched the Star Wars trilogy, I was like, hey, there's the scene they've stolen from the Powerpuff Girls. I'm kidding, relax. But I'm surprised they never used this character much after that episode because it was a really popular one. And next up, I loved the episode of Officer Mike. He was a lazy, stereotypical donut-eating cop who wanted all the glory without the work. He thought he was up for a promotion, but he got fired instead and ended up blaming the Powerpuff Girls for taking the opportunity from him, even though he was just a lazy bum.
This is no joke, Bukowski. You are the worst, most incompetent officer I have ever known.
Every moment of this episode was just comedy gold. I loved his boomer mentality where he just expected things to come to him because of his age and seniority. That one I could watch on loop over and over because there is so much subtle humor and real-world relatability.
Mike Bukowski, you are under arrest.
Hilarious episode. The final one I'll mention is one I've seen some people crap on, but it was one of my favorites. Harold Smith, like Officer Mike, was a bored and miserable man stuck in a 9-to-5 rut. The love seemed to have all but died between him and his wife and kids, and everyone was just going through the motions. He was basically a disaffected suburban man who turned into a domestic T-word, which is a very relatable thing today when you think about it. Some people thought he turned evil out of nowhere, but I felt it was one of the more realistic portrayals of casual descent into villainy. It was quite realistic. The end of the episode birthed a new villain in his wife, and the follow-up episode was even funnier in my opinion. This declining suburban family managed to find a shared passion in evil, and it was probably my favorite 2-episode arc in the whole show. And the fact that the stakes were so low and local to a domestic dispute between two neighbors was a great direction to take. The voice actors as usual, especially Kath Souchi, I think is how you say her name? She played the wife of Harold, and she was in rare form while voicing this character. I say this line all the time.
Oh my goodness, what happened here?
Such a classic episode. There was also that one episode called The Beat-Alls, which was a parody of the Beatles band. Get it? Beat-Alls, Beatles. It was kinda like the Sinister Six in Spider-Man, but for the Powerpuff Girls. It was a great episode, and the punchline at the end was a shot at Yoko Ono, which, you know, however you feel about that whole situation, it was a great parody.
I'm in the same boat as you. Villainy, too, is a male-dominated field. Sending me to jail will be a blow for all of womankind.
Actually, just going through these characters has made me realize how unfair I have been to this show. In all my random Cartoon Network recaps, I've never had a good reason to skip this show. It was really hilarious when it wanted to be. Now, I can't comment on the reboot or the continuation of the show or whatever that is I came across online. To be honest, I could not be bothered. I think I've been very clear about my feelings on new animation. But enough of what I think, I've rambled on long enough. Who are the most memorable villains from this show, and do you think Superman's rogues can even come close? Remember Superman that I brought up at the beginning? The whole reason you clicked on this video? Let me know your opinions in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
You can't do this to me!